So our next section that you can add to 4.0, the introduction, if you'd like to add this to your notes at the bottom or on the back of 4.0, that would be more than fine. 4.1, we're going to define the idea of what is exactly culture. So the word culture, I'd like you to know a couple of parts of it. First of all, it does come from a Latin word that simply means to cultivate. So when you think about it, when you are cultivating land, and I know many of us who are from Southern California, we're not real familiar with the idea of agriculture and cultivation, but when a farmer cultivates the land, they are growing something. Something is sprouting, it's developing. Culture really is like that. It is little seeds of activity, of language, of religion that is beginning to sprout within us and grows. A book definition of culture is the entire way of life for a society. So I'd like you to know both of those ideas. First of all, it does come from a Latin word meaning to cultivate, and then it is the entire way of life for a society. So this is a group of people that grow up in a certain region, and this is their entire way of life, the way they think, the way that they behave, the traditions that they embrace. So the definition, again, the entire way of life for a society. When we learn culture and when it is grown within us, culture will tell us how to first of all behave. So whether you're part of an ethnic culture, or whether you're part of a religious culture or a school culture, that culture will tell you how to behave, how to act. I want you to think and maybe write down a couple of things. What are some of the rules that are in our culture that tell us how we should behave? Think about etiquette. Think about behavior. Write down a couple of your own ideas. What are some of the rules that are in our culture? And I'm mostly talking about our American culture. If you're from a different ethnic background, maybe your Chinese culture or your Vietnamese culture, what are some behaviors that culture tells you how to behave? And then culture also tells us how to think. So I want you to think, what are some of the ideas that end up shaping our lives, some of the values that shape our lives in America? And again, maybe you're from a different culture. You can think about some of the ideas that shape your life, maybe things that your ancestors have taught to their children, who have them taught them to you. So think about the behaviors that we have learned within our culture, and then the ways that we think, the ideas that shape our lives, and write a couple of those things down. When I think of behavior, especially in the United States, here's a couple, and maybe you have some others, but definitely shaking hands when we're first introduced to someone. We are taught in the United States that you should shake hands, opening doors for other people. And this isn't necessarily just being a gentleman, like boys, it's not just for you opening a door for a girl, but definitely if anyone's coming towards you or if you're exiting a building and someone's coming in, open the door and allow them to come in first. Again, it's just a kind gesture. The driving rules that we have in the United States, there's kind of an etiquette that you play within the on the road, on the freeway. We have specific rules that we're supposed to follow, but then there's kind of like an unspoken way of behavior on the road as well, that we, even if the traffic says that we can drive at 60 miles an hour, we're still cautious of other people around us, and we are going to let people in at certain times, and we're going to be aware of those surroundings. I think of some values that shape our lives in the United States, the idea of democracy, that everyone has a voice, that all people are created equal. If you are a follower of Christ, there is the way of Jesus, and that should definitely be teaching us how to think, that we should have the mind of Christ. So, definitely depending upon your background, and of course, we're going to talk about some subculture ideas too in the days ahead, and we're part of a school culture here, and there are some ideas that shape our school culture as well. There's ideas maybe that you have learned in your home, values that you have learned in your home that tell you how to think and behave and act. So you don't have to write this down exactly, but these ideas I'd like you to make sure that you really do understand. The concept of culture lies at the heart of human geography. migration decisions, patterns, and landscapes are fundamentally influenced by cultural attitudes and practices. I think we see that a lot right now. We in America have a culture of acceptance, and we have for many, many centuries. And right now, we are coming face to face with a dilemma about migration and people who are trying to get into our country, and it has divided our country. And so, at the heart of American culture, there are some ideas that are competing with one another. The idea of being a refuge for people, but also the idea of keeping people safe within our country. So that definitely has a bearing on our human geography. Also, culture to humans is the development of ideas and the adaptation to the world in which we live. So we're learning on a daily basis how to think and how to act, and we are adapting to that. If you go into a new culture, if you went to a different school today, that school has a different culture. It could be another Christian school. That school is going to have a way that they behave and they act and they think. And while there may be similar things to here at Brethren, you also are probably going to find some other types of thinking and behaving that other schools would promote as well. It's very important to know that culture is not inherited or inborn. It is not something we are naturally born with. I mean, you can definitely see this in people who come and maybe they're adopted from another country, right? That you don't take your culture that you are born with, your bloodline, and become that. No, instead, culture is learned. It is something that we develop from childhood, and we can also develop it as adults. And we take that on and we learn it, and it develops within us and it grows. Culture tells us how to behave and think through several systems or vehicles. I'm going to use it as a vehicle because vehicles carry things to places. So I want you to think of these things as vehicles that are bringing culture to us. First of all, language. So simply by the language that we use, we are learning a way to respond to our surroundings. I think of even within different homes or within different family groups, what they call their parents, mother or father versus mom and dad or pops. All those different words have different connotations, and the language that we use, the vernacular, the dialect that's being used, carries with it a sense of emotion. In some languages, words for mother can have a more compassionate tone to them. So language carries a lot of value within a society and definitely carries on the idea of culture. Religion. Definitely religion tells us how to behave and how to think. I think of Christianity specifically and the idea that we behave as Christ, that we think as Christ. And the Bible verse just keeps coming to me that we have the mind of Christ, that we filter things through that mind. Buddhists do the same thing, right? They filter the way that they act and the way that they behave through their religious values. Food actually is a vehicle for culture. If you take a simple piece of chicken and you eat it plain, it's very boring. But different cultures, what they've done is they've taken the spices that they have that are native to their culture or to their ethnic region. You take those spices and you infuse them into your food, whether it be a piece of chicken or rice. There's all kinds of ways that you can prepare rice and chicken and beef and pork. There's different ways to prepare those foods, and different cultures will prepare them in different ways. Clothing definitely can be an icon or a symbol for what culture you're from, depending upon what is acceptable for a man to wear or a woman to wear. Symbols, think of our coexist sign, the symbols that exist within a culture. I think of the Buddhist karma wheel. It has those 8 spokes, and all of those spokes on the wheel represent something, but they all come together in the middle and they tie together. So a symbol is very important within culture to represent something. It emotes a spirit, a feeling within people, and it gives them a signal of maybe how to think or behave. And then different rituals that we go through. I think of rituals maybe like as holidays, traditions that people have. Even if we around this time period when we think about Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's different rituals that we go through with whether it be gift giving or whether it be telling each other what we're thankful for about them. The songs that we sing, the Christmas carols that we sing, those all represent something within the culture. And then artifacts. Definitely, you can look at these buildings here and their shape, their architecture. They come from somewhere and they represent something. They oftentimes you can see an artifact, a building or a car, and you can tell where it's from and what society made it. I think of also music and movies. Definitely, like when I think of like British movies, British sitcoms, TV shows, they have a different sense of humor in them. Music that comes from Scandinavian countries, Australian countries, sometimes has a different twang to it, a different movement to it, and they represent some of the foundational pieces of their culture as well. So this is where I'd like for you to end 4.1. I would like you to make sure that you have some questions written on the left-hand side of your page, and then create a summary with at least 50 words at the bottom of your page. Please don't come to class without all of those things being done and being ready to give some feedback and some ideas, maybe even some questions about what you have on this presentation, things that you have maybe experienced from other cultures, or an example of things that you could present that would better help us to understand this.